Men are laughed at. Men aren't taken seriously, and men still feel like opening up about their problems is an issue. When you're sitting there alone, regretful of most of your life's decisions so far, and you are disgusted with what you see in the mirror, what are you to do? That feeling of total hopelessness, I believe, is what the majority of men feel right before they dive into the world of self-improvement. And since they feel like they have no one else to turn to, they look up some basic questions about their problems on the internet. How to get over a breakup, how to be more productive, how to be happier, etc. And they consume video after video after video. There isn't any real visible change yet, but the hope that was once snuffed out, or was never there to begin with, starts to reel itself in like a fish that's unsatisfied with its bait. There's still some resistance to the idea that improving oneself could help fix them, but the validity of these online gurus' statements and the soundness of their advice feels good enough to give it a try. And thus, self-improvement becomes therapy for men. This method of therapy actually seems to be very useful for a lot of guys out there, both young and old. I receive plenty of comments about how someone's managed to get out of a terrible hole of depression, find meaning, and start to actualize their potential thanks to my videos, as well as other people's videos within this niche. But as my human brain that is wired to search for negativity likes to do, it became skeptical of the idea that self-improvement could be an equal, if not better, replacement than therapy for men. So how do we even get to the point where self-improvement became such a massive phenomenon for young men who are struggling, and what are the implications of this? Should men always seek out self-improvement rather than traditional therapy, or are there specific instances in which one form of healing is better than the other? Those are the questions that I will be attempting to answer in this video. My interest in these questions peaked when I was scrolling through some YouTube comments on a video I stumbled across titled "It's Deeper Than You Think" by the YouTuber Kidology. In the video, she describes the differences between forming relationships for men and women, and she provides a really interesting article that I will be citing in this video. But what really caught my attention was what was said in the top comment. I once heard an evolutionary psychologist talk about how hospitalized psychiatric male patients in London during the bombings suddenly stood up and drove around in ambulances, basically helped as they could, when only minutes ago they were deeply depressed and in catatonic states. He used this example to showcase that maybe the traditional approach of talking therapy isn't as effective for men as it is for women, and that maybe there should be an approach towards helping them feel more useful. I don't know, just found that story very interesting, although I have no idea if it's true. Now, after reading this comment, I tried to scour the internet for any information to see whether this story was actually true or not, but I couldn't find anything. But let's give this person the benefit of the doubt and assume it is true, because even if it isn't, I think it gives us a clue as to why men turn to self-improvement as a form of therapy, to feel more useful. I know for me, it was incredibly difficult to feel like I had any value or purpose as a man when I was an incompetent little kid. Nobody really took me seriously because I had no confidence in myself, I didn't take care of my body, and I got pretty awful grades too. I still remember the days where I had to have parent-teacher conferences because I'd be failing English class, and my teachers and parents would just sit there and look at me like I was a toddler who just drew crayons all over the wall. If I could not use my body and mind in some way in order to achieve a goal, then my life felt pretty meaningless, and society was in accordance with these beliefs that I had no inherent value. But when you start on the path towards self-improvement, there's always something new to strive towards and always something more to get. The way you address your issues isn't by talking things out, but rather acting things out. It's like for the first time in your life, you start to realize, well, hey, maybe I'm not destined to be the average depressed person like I thought I was. And maybe I can build my value by improving myself. Of course, with talking therapies, there are sometimes goals or intentions within each session, but with self-improvement, the strength of usefulness you feel from conquering a feat over yourself can produce more intense feelings of hopefulness. I think this explains why the vast majority of my audience, as well as the creators in this niche, are men. Men are gravitated towards this type of content because society places value on our practical usefulness and how much we can provide, instead of how nurturing we are or how in touch with our emotions we are. But why is this the case? Is it because men are innately less emotional than women, or does it have to do with how we are raised? Well, an article written by Tori DeAngelis might be able to give us some insight. In the article, she explains two psychologists' differing theories on men's inability to properly communicate and express their emotions. This inability to express and identify certain emotions is called alexithymia, and it's thought that men's rates of alexithymia are higher than women's. One of the psychologists from the article states, "Research on children from infancy through the school year shows how this can happen. Mothers Mothers, for instance, expose baby girls to a wider range of emotions than baby boys and work harder to control their son's emotional volatility. Fathers step in to socialize their toddlers along gender lines at around 13 months, verbally roughhousing their sons and talking in more emotional terms with daughters. As kids get older, both parents foster this rift by discouraging sons from expressing vulnerable emotions and encouraging such expressions in daughters. I think this has been brought about by a sort of generational acceptance that this is how the world needs to be. Our parents' parents passed down this way of raising their kids, which our parents adopted, and then they imposed that onto us. And as a result, this normative alexithymia, or alexithymia that forms due to societal pressures and norms, becomes the standard. So since we are young, we are programmed to seek out ways of dealing with hardships in the form of external action instead of internal reflection and acceptance. And self-improvement provides a path with which we can do so. My self-improvement journey really began before I had even heard of that term or knew what it meant when I started lifting weights in college. Out of all the things preached within the self-improvement community, exercise might just be the objectively best one for you to implement because it improves your well-being, mental health, sleep, life expectancy, and so much more. But getting started, especially when you have no one to help guide you through it, is extremely difficult. And that's why I have partnered with today's sponsor, CoPilot. CoPilot is an app that is so much more than an app, and it is the best way to reach your fitness goals. Usually I'm very skeptical about workout apps because they usually just give you a generic workout that isn't tailored to your specific needs, and you're also not working with a personal trainer who will help keep you accountable. But with CoPilot, all of that changes. You go through their process of finding your ideal coach, and they will match you with a real certified personal trainer. I ended up getting matched with Devin, and we talked about formulating a workout plan that helped deal with the knee pain I was having. This is one of the best parts about CoPilot. Not only are you getting the accountability from a coach, which is crucial to staying on track, but your coach creates a plan specifically designed for you based on your skill level, fitness goals, how much time you have to work out, and equipment you have access to, if any. The app was super easy to use, and it gave me a demonstration of how to perform each exercise, as well as how long I should rest in between sets. And throughout the first week of using CoPilot, I had the option to send text or video messages to Devin at any time to talk about how the workouts were going and if anything needed to be changed. It truly is amazing how well CoPilot keeps you from straying off your fitness plan as opposed to other apps. Over 75% of CoPilot clients continue to work out after 100 days, meaning that CoPilot clients are 9 times more likely to stick to their fitness goals. I cannot suggest many workout apps, but CoPilot is truly in a league of its own because it's so much more than just a fitness app. It's you working with a real expert that is giving you real support and guidance. So if you are finally serious about sticking to your workout goals, then click the first link in my description, which is go.mycopilot.com/ColeHastings to get a free trial with your own expert fitness and health coach. Now back to today's topic. In our current world, there seems to be a growing nihilistic cloud that lingers over society, and producing feelings of purpose are becoming increasingly more difficult due to what we do on a daily basis as well as what it used to mean to be a man. About 50 to 60 years ago, you were setting yourself up for marriage in your 20s, maybe purchasing a house, and interaction with people on a daily basis was almost necessary. But now, the modern man has no identity. We have exposed and broken out of a flawed system that told us to go to school, get a job, get married, and retire at the expense of having no real sense of self or direction. Before the rise of the internet and individuality, people derived much of their identity not only just from this system we were all indoctrinated into, but also based on what their peers thought of them. Community was integral to feeling a sense of meaning and purpose, and it still is. But now, pretty much the best way to find a community in our current world is through the online realm. Self-improvement is a way to accomplish not only becoming more useful, but also being part of a movement that feels bigger than you. And it helps to shape your identity more. I think this explains the more recent rise of the We Go Gym movement, because gym culture and self-improvement culture are almost one and the same. All over my Instagram Reels feed, I get short clips of buff-ass dudes working out with inspiring quotes popping up on the center of the screen while some intense dramatic music plays in the background. These videos, along with self-improvement videos, have an extremely alluring feel to them. Almost like a potential friend calling to you and reaching out and saying, "Hey, we understand what you're going through. We know all of these problems that modern society causes and how the world is, and we can help you with that, so give us a shot. You read through all the comments of all the other people saying motivating things and lifting each other up, metaphorically and literally, and you think to yourself, I want to be a part of this positive movement. And before you know it, you're dry scooping pre-workout, measuring the size of your arms in the mirror, and blasting hardstyle while you stare intensely at the ground in between sets. These online communities help to shape the identity of the once identityless modern man, while also making us feel more valuable and healthier in the process. It's also important to address the rise in single unwed mother households within the US and how that contributes to self-improvement's now rise in popularity. The United States has the most single-parent households than any other country, and half of all children that live in the US now only live with a single parent. Without a solid father figure in their lives, it's hard for young men to grasp the idea of masculinity and how they can start to feel like they have a place in the world. A well-involved father lowers the risk of a child doing poorly in school, getting into alcohol and substance abuse, criminal activity, and lowers the risk of suicidal thoughts. Naturally, if you're a young man and you're trying to understand how to deal with the hardships and sufferings that come with life, you're gonna search for these answers online. And thus, the rise of internet fathers or internet role models has now exploded. Now, I personally think this has definitely produced a net positive. Although many of these internet fathers and role models have a lot of beliefs and ways of functioning that I don't necessarily agree with, they have helped hundreds of thousands of men get out of a very, very rough place. And even though an internet father isn't a total replacement for a real father, it's better than having a completely purposeless child that resorts to self-destruction as a way to cope with life's inevitable challenges. Over the years, I've had a very love-hate relationship with self-improvement. Through improving myself, I was able to build this YouTube channel, create a successful business, and help positively impact the lives of others. But as you go throughout this journey and you get feedback from all different kinds of people, you start to realize that self-improvement can potentially distort a young man's perception of objective reality and actually only exacerbate their problems instead of solve them. So now I want to talk about the problems that come with basic self-improvement, these online communities, and when men should seek traditional therapy. The biggest problem that I see with the self-improvement niche in general is that many of its creators are only contributing to recreating the problems that got us here in the first place. Many red pill and manosphere content creators will tell you, hey, this is the way that society will value you, this is the only way that society will ever work, so this is what you gotta do. Then you have a bunch of young guys trying to validate themselves for the sake of being understood and accepted, even if what they're doing isn't at all in alignment with their real interests and passions. Because of this, they are creating many new men who will only reinforce society's existing problems, because their solutions usually don't offer any new avenues that could potentially stop the endless cycle of men not feeling inherently valuable, not being in touch with their emotions, and wanting to not be alive. This can also lead to a very polarizing view of the world, as many men adopt this my way and no one else's mindset. As a result, this only breeds more disagreement between those on self-improvement and those who aren't, because the young guys on self-improvement start to believe their way of living and approaching problems is the only right way. And this tribalist mindset can sometimes cause the young men on self-improvement to be incredibly unempathetic of other people's individual problems and aspirations. I see a lot of comments like this in self-improvement communities of these young guys who think they've figured out the world, they've figured out exactly what they need to do to be the best person ever, and anyone that disagrees with them or thinks slightly different than them, they just completely bash them in the comments, and I hate to see it. There's also this feeling of superiority that self-improvement can make you feel like when you think that it makes you better than other people, when in reality, there is no one true and right way to live that will apply to absolutely every single man's life out there. Now, it may actually be true that you are more satisfied with your life than most people, and that if they do what you do, they might feel like their life is more meaningful too, but we should encourage men to approach the path towards feeling purposeful, strong, and healthy in their own way, instead of enforcing a strict set of guidelines to abide by. The goal of self-improvement should not be to put yourself on an imaginary pedestal. It's to garner the strength to help lift others up and help them see their potential, even if their way of actualizing their potential is different from yours. And possibly the most counterintuitive phenomenon that I see from a subset of people who get into self-improvement is when self-improvement actually starts to make you feel worse about yourself than when you got into self-improvement. I'll give you an example. Let's look at some of the people who do nofap. They know that choking the chicken doesn't necessarily make them feel like they can conquer the world, but it doesn't make them feel too bad, and they only do it, let's say, once a week and not to adult content. Then they get sucked into the nofap community. They become aware of all these incredible benefits like increased confidence, more energy, and a higher work ethic. And they start to think, I have to do this if I want to become the best that I can possibly be. So they're doing it for a couple weeks and then they do the dreaded relapse. And for the first time, they start to feel absolutely awful about themselves after choking the chicken. And after that relapse, they go into a downward spiral of low self-worth, overly indulging in pleasures, and feeling incredibly depressed. It never happened like this before they did NoFap, but as soon as they became aware of the concept and what people told them about what it means to be on NoFap, they changed their beliefs to match that, and they let these beliefs dictate their life and how they feel. Self-improvement and society as a whole is very similar to this. We discover things that could be potentially valuable to us and increase our perceived respect and status. We conform to those expectations and norms and live by them. And when we don't meet those expectations, we automatically assume we have no value. For those people who were brought up to never feel like they were enough and have always been too hard on themselves, or were taught to suppress their emotions through constant work and effort, self-improvement becomes an endless pursuit of external and internal validation that never becomes fully met. Because for these people, there are some serious psychological issues at the root of their problems that can't simply be fixed by hitting the gym, meditating, or working on a business. Instead, what they need is a different form of therapy, and perhaps the more traditional kind. Now, I searched all over the web for research done on the most effective methods of therapy for men, and to no surprise, the results are very limited. But an article titled "Engaging Men in Psychological Treatment, a Scoping Interview" has been beneficial for providing me with some insight. In the study, they looked at and compared a ton of empirical evidence on how to approach therapy treatment for men, and just about all of them agreed on a few things. The first was that actionable, goal-oriented steps that made the client feel useful was one of the best ways of doing so, which explains why typical self-improvement related activities can be so effective. The second was a non-judgmental understanding that all men are victim to the expectations of what makes someone truly masculine, which includes not showing emotion and having their more personal problems not taken seriously. But as for what the perfect type of therapy is for each different man, well, it really depends. Based on your cultural background, the trauma you've been through, and your current beliefs, the type of therapy that's going to be most effective for you will vary. And indeed, talking therapy can be more effective than just basic self-improvement, especially for men who have been taught that being vulnerable with anyone is bad. But one thing is for sure, we all need to normalize letting men open up so that they feel comfortable getting vulnerable, talking with others who have gone through a similar journey, and healing through both action and reflection. And it's my hope that more creators within the self-improvement community start to address where the root of these problems are coming from, instead of just giving them a guideline on how to feel more valuable in our current society. Instead, what's needed is a breakdown and refinement of the ways in which we value men as a whole. We need to encourage parents to start to instill the idea that it's okay for men to express and try to explain their emotions, so we can reduce the chances of all the negative activities and feelings happening less in men. Because vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. And when paired with improving oneself through action, that is when I believe you become a truly well-rounded man. It also means we break down the idea that being a man only applies to one specific lifestyle with specific interests and passions, and instead let men explore their creativity and unique interests without judgment. And we create more safe spaces for men to talk about their problems without judgment and without feeling like their problems aren't valid. What I'm proposing here is not a rebuttal against masculinity. Masculinity is incredible. What I'm rather proposing is an evolution. By taking every great feature about traditional masculinity, such as progress, improvement, ambition, drive, strength, willpower, leadership, assertiveness, and a willingness to provide, removing the features that lead men to want to commit violent crimes and unalive themselves, and combining this with healthy outlets such as communities that help men understand they are not alone, that is when I believe we can start to make real progress. But until the root of these problems get addressed and we teach men how to express, identify, and create healthy outlets for their emotions, which isn't typically taught in your run-of-the-mill self-improvement videos, we will continue to see these negative behaviors and mindsets within men who don't feel aligned with the traditional masculine archetype. So is self-improvement a good form of therapy for men? Well, yes, as long as you're not neglecting your emotions in the process. The most concise advice I can give you is that when you are struggling, allow yourself to feel those emotions. Do not run away from them and face them head on, and notice what is happening within your body and mind while it is happening. Let yourself talk through them and journal about them, and ideally with a therapist who you can connect with. And then, once you've done that, put in the action. When you reflect, accept, and act by progressing yourself in the form of movement, you become not only a competent man, but an emotionally intelligent and mature man as well. But the way in which you achieve that will look slightly different for just about everybody. Thank you to all my patrons on Patreon. If you don't know what this is, it's a platform separate from YouTube where I put out exclusive content and you can talk to me on the phone. Link in the description to that. And don't forget to check out CoPilot using the link in my description too. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts on masculinity and how we can kind of deal with this masculinity crisis, check out this video right here. And I am heading out. Peace.